Hello, this is C-Slim from Suicide Bombers, and today I'm going to show you this bass that I've been working on and off for quite a few years. It's been on the back burner for some time now, but I bought this about 4 years ago. And it's obviously not a real Rickenbacker. This is a do-it-yourself kit from Fretwire. And it comes as a complete kit with the neck. The neck has the fretboard and the frets already on, and the body has the binding on and all the holes for the pickup cavities and the controls and the holes for the tuners and all that stuff is already machined out when you get it. But you have to put the neck on, and this is a set neck construction, so you have to glue the neck in. It's a bit odd, I'd say, for a do-it-yourself kit that they don't use a bolt-on neck, because that would be simpler for the average person to put on there. But it has a set neck. It comes with all the hardware and the pickups and all that stuff, but I've changed most of that out anyway. We got a hip shot bridge here. The kit came with a Music Man style bridge. That looked kind of ridiculous on a Rickenbacker style bass, so I bought this replacement bridge, the hip shot Rickenbacker replacement bridge, and that is an awesome bridge. Most people would consider this a better bridge than the ones that came stock with proper Rickenbackers. And it costs more than the entire kit as well, but fair enough, it's a good bridge. Then we got the pickups, and the kit came with a jazz bass pickup in the bridge position and a mini humbucker in the neck position, which is kind of a weird setup. And I don't think I ever tried the jazz bass thing. I'm not a super fan of Fender basses, so I didn't use that. I tried the mini humbucker for the neck position. It's kind of a weak signal thing. I fiddled with different kind of pickups in this thing, and it didn't really work very well at all. And before I put in these two, these are reissue pickups of the vintage Thunderbird, and the 60s Thunderbirds had this kind of pickups. They're completely different from modern Thunderbird pickups that you'll find from the 80s and onwards. Very bright, sharp sound in these old style pickups, but they're brand new on bottom of eBay. They weren't very expensive, maybe like $30-$40 something for the set. Electronics, took the tone controls away, got a volume for the bridge, and a volume for the neck, and normal pickup switch. And I put two outputs on it, one normal output and one Rico sound output. The Rico sound is a system where you split, so you get one pickup to each output, and then you can run them into different amps and create quite a cool sound out of that. Move the inputs down to where the tone controls normally would be. Originally, it has the inputs or outputs on the back here, but I figured that might, interfere with your leg when you play and stuff like that. So I put them up here on the front, and I got a large steel washer underneath there to so they don't break the plastic that easy. The tuners, the tuners are the one that came with the kit. They're all right, I suppose. The main issue with this was that the holes, they weren't very thoroughly machined out, so they were so I had to sort of fiddle with them to get the screws and get it in properly. But the tuners in itself is all right. The main problem was that this clover leaf machine head fell off, and that was I didn't hit it with anything. I didn't bump the headstock into something. It just fell off in the middle of the song. Luckily, that was at a rehearsal. But I picked it up and I glued it back in there because it sits in a slot, so the glue doesn't actually turn the mechanism. The glue just keeps it in the slot, so you can turn the mechanism. It looks kind of messy, but it's all right. I'll see it. Maybe I'll change those later. The main issue with this bass at this point, which is the reason why I haven't used it as much as I want, is the neck. The neck is way too soft. I mean, just listen to this. You normally don't do that when you play bass, obviously, but that just says something about the neck. I'll show you my Thunderbird for reference. Okay, so here's my Thunderbird, and this is an Epiphone. This is actually the cheapest Epiphone Thunderbird, and it's a completely different thing. You push all you have and all you got, and it goes a bit out of tune, but you can't bend the neck to mute. But on this fret wire thing you can. So that in itself isn't the main problem. The problem is, for instance, if you break a string or if you take one string off, the neck moves so much that you mute the rest of the strings. So if you break a string during a concert, during a song, you have to stop play immediately and swap out bass. You can't even make it through the rest of the song. And also, it's very moody. It changes all the time. I mean, I adjust the truss rod on this maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and from one week to the next, it's fine. One week, next week, it's buzzing on all the frets, and then next week after that, the action is way too high, and it's not stable. So that's a bit of an issue. So I wanna address that. You can't really, since this is a set neck, you can't just swap out the neck. You can get the glue to loosen using heat and hot steam or something like that, but you can't buy a neck that fits in this pocket, because almost every neck that you can buy separately is a bolt-on neck. Like, that makes sense, you know, because bolt-on necks you can just bolt them off and put another one in there. Nobody makes necks, at least nobody that I can find, makes set necks separately. And a bolt-on neck doesn't fit in the neck pocket, and most of them are built to Fender standards. So even if you can get them with like a custom headstock or whatever, they're built to fit a Fender body, and a Fender body is longer than this. So you would actually have to bolt it on up here, which means you would have to make some kind of weird adapter that you glue in, and that'll just be a mess. So we're not going to do that. The option left for a new neck is to build one. That's a lot of work, and obviously that would be interesting work to do, but I'm essentially building a new base in that case, because, you know, I'll be left with just this piece of wood down here and everything else will be swapped out. That's not much of a kit. So what I'm going to try to attempt before that is to put in carbon fiber stiffeners in this neck. Carbon fiber stiffeners are used in some guitar necks, especially higher end guitars. They usually sit underneath the fretboard. They put them in before they put the fretboard on, next to the truss rod. I'm not going to take this fretboard off. That is possible, but it's a lot of work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mill down 2 slots from the back and then put some specially made carbon fiber, well, basically flat stock of carbon fiber in those 2 slots. And I'm going to show you how I attempt to do that. Let's go to the garage. So, carbon fiber is essentially the same principle as fiberglass, just more expensive and a lot stronger. It's basically a piece of cloth that you laminate with a resin, or essentially glue, to stiffen it up so it turns into a panel. And the glue or the resin that we're going to use with the carbon fiber is epoxy, which is a 2-component resin that you mix together and it hardens by itself. We're going to use just a piece of MDF panel as a mold. If you're making a more complex piece, like a body panel for a car or something like that, you would have a more complex mold, but we're just going to use this piece of MDF panel because we're making a straight flat stock piece. And then I'll cover this with plastic tape, this thin kind of plastic. I think it's kind of a plastic that you would use for construction behind the wall to stop moist from getting into the wall. That's so we don't glue the carbon fiber to the MDF. And then I'm going to squeeze down on top of it another piece of wood to compress it. Normally when you make carbon fiber in more complex shapes, you would use vacuum to suck out air, basically to get it as thin as possible. Because the thing is, the carbon fiber gives you strength. The epoxy resin does not. You need the epoxy resin to turn it from a cloth to a solid panel. But you don't want too much resin in there, because that will just give you a lot of weight, but not a lot of strength, or not any more strength. So we're gonna mix up the resin, and then we're gonna lay carbon fiber cloth in several layers, because that's what's build up the thickness. And we're gonna do quite a lot of layers. We're gonna do 14 layers. which is what we need to build a thickness of about 3 millimeters, a little less than 3 millimeters. And the reason why I'm going for 3 millimeters is basically that's about as thin as I'm able to make that slot in the neck. Carbon fiber is essentially as strong as mild steel in the same dimension, but about 1/5 of the weight. And obviously 2 pieces of 3 millimeter steel in the guitar neck would be, that would, I mean, that's as strong you can drive a car over that and it won't break when it's standing on the, because it's standing right up on the edge when I put it in the neck. So that's going to be plenty strong. I could have probably made it a bit thinner, but I wouldn't be able to make the slot into the neck. Okay, so here we are. We can see that I'm using a paintbrush to apply the resin, and I got this special roller that you can see I'm using here to press the carbon fiber down into the resin. That's to get as little resin as possible into the mix. The carbon fiber that I'm using is a single direction carbon fiber, so I'm laying 2 layers in the length direction and then 1 across. Obviously the main load on this neck is going to be in the length direction, but it's nice to have something going across to stiffen up the panel. So it's just basically a matter of laying these pieces of cloth down, put resin on, push it down with the roller, more resin, another layer, and so forth. And this is I've sped up the pictures to 10 times the speed. So this took about an hour to do this whole process.
It's nothing like TV, killing ache that's in my bones. Desert ice just can't be served. I'm the only one who isn't laughing, didn't get the joke. I got an epitaph for rock and roll, tattooed on my worn out soul, and I'd kill myself for the undisputed truth. I'd kill myself for everlasting youth. I'd kill myself to see where I'm headed.
Alright, so now we're gonna lay that top piece of wood on top there to squeeze it down. I measured this before I squeezed it down, and it was almost 5 millimeters, so there's quite a lot of resin in there that doesn't really need to be there, because I calculated the height based on the thickness of the carbon fiber, which you can calculate. I'm not going to get into that now, but I calculated 14 layers would be just a little less than 3 millimeters. So this is basically like you would do when you glue your wood project together. You squeeze it down and you use these clamps to keep the pressure on it. So here you can see all the resin that's been squeezed out of the mold here. Apparently I used way too much resin, but it's not a problem. I mean, it's a waste, but it won't affect the part. Okay, so this has been curing for 3 days, which is way longer than it needs to, but it just happened to be like that. I'm taking it apart. You can see the top wood there got loose very easily because of the plastic. On the bottom here, the there was so much squeeze out that the glue actually went outside of the plastic and got hold of the MDF, so that didn't really affect the carbon fiber because the carbon fiber was on top of the plastic. But to get the whole mix free from the MDF, I had to grind it loose. Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see the edge there, right here, where it hasn't been squeezed down. You can see how the piece of wood squeezed down here, but not on the edge. You can see what a difference it makes in thickness. It's almost half the thickness where it was squeezed down, so that has a lot to do. I mean, you get rid of a lot of glue, and that saves a lot of weight, but it keeps the same strength as long as it's got the same amount of carbon fiber layers. And this is about 2.5 millimeters. It's a bit thin. I don't know if I'm gonna lay a bit more on there, or if I'm just gonna see how thin the slots in my heads or in my neck is gonna be. We'll see. So I've been roughly cutting the edges to get rid of all the squeeze out resin and make it into a square piece. And now I'm block sanding the edges so it get a nice straight edge along, so it'll sit flush into the neck slots. Alright, so here we have the base, which is covered in masking tape to protect the finish, mounted on this jig. It's pretty straightforward. This is the top of the kitchen counter, which is a pretty thick and straight and stable piece of board. Then the base is bolted down. There's a groove up here for the nut, so it doesn't ride on the nut. It sits perfectly flush on the fretboard. I straightened out the fretboard. When I was playing this earlier, I had a little bit of a front bow on the neck to avoid fret buzz. Before I disassembled it, I tightened the truss rod a little bit to straighten the neck, which made it worse to play on, but the neck was straight. Then I took the strings off, and it had the most insane back bow that I have ever seen. So basically, this neck has no mind on its own. It's just a battle between the strings and the truss rod. But I straightened that, and that lies now perfectly flat on this board. Because I got that groove for the nut there, so that it doesn't ride on the nut. And at the back here, I used a piece of plywood as a shims to build up the body, because obviously the body sits lower than the neck. So it's rest on this. This is bolted through the holes for the bridge, and then bolted down to the table. At this end, I got a wooden block in the angle of the headstock, which is bolted to the board. And then I got these bolts here to go through the tuner holes. Then 2x4s on each side to these for like rails for the saw that I'm going to use, because I'm going to use a saw, and that's, yeah, we'll get to that. And these obviously make you go in a straight line. So this is leveled exactly to the height of the body, so you can run your saw across here and then furthermore in over the body. They're not going to cut grooves into the body, but you need but the guide for the saw is longer than the actual cutting line of the saw. Yeah. What I'm going to use to cut, I was going to use a router, because that would be the preferred tool for this kind of stuff, but we're going to cut very thin lines. It was going to be 3mm, but the carbon fiber piece actually turned out to be just 2.5. Anyway, finding out a router bit, I couldn't find any hardware store around here, any 3mm router bit. I found one online from China on eBay, this thing. But I don't know what they was thinking. Normally a router bit has 2 cutting edges, and then obviously the distance and similar length from the center, and then the distance between the 2 cutting edges would be 6mm for 6mm drill cutting bit, and 12mm for 12mm cutting bit, and so forth. This one only got 1 cutting edge. And this was advertised as a 3mm router bit. And it's got one cutting edge and it's 3mm from the center. So I don't know what they were thinking. It is just going to be go halfway around and then go back. Anyway, it doesn't work because it's just going to go around, cut 3mm on one side of the center, and then go and cut 3mm on the other side. And that will be a 6mm groove. And I figured 3mm cutting bits for a router, they're probably going to break every once in a while. And they weren't that expensive, so I bought 5 of them, and they're all like that. So it's not a production fault, it's not a packing fault, it's just whoever designed this is an idiot. So I'm going to use a saw, and the saw that I'm going to use is this thing. And you probably think that I am absolutely insane to cut this kind of delicate work on this, but I don't really have any other choice. I was going to use a smaller circle saw. I was going to use this one, which is a little bit more nice and neat, but this doesn't cut deep enough down. It cuts about 4 centimeters deep, and when it is at that depth, the motor sticks out on this side of the guide, so you can only have a guide on one side, and I don't really want to have double security with one piece of wood at each side controlling side going absolutely straight line, because you can drift off. If you only have a guide on this side, you try to stick to it on that side, but you can drift off that way. But when you have a guide on each side, you can't do that, you have to go in a straight line. But this doesn't cut deep enough. We're not going to make that deep of a cut into the actual neck, but because of the body, we have to start up here, which is about 50 millimeters, 2 inches up. And then we're not going to, obviously, we're not going to cut through the fretboard, but we're going to cut probably 42, 43 millimeters down. And this can cut exactly 40, and then you don't have basically guides on. But this one can cut 65. I'll put on the finest blade that I can find. It's relatively thin. It cuts about 2.5 millimeter of a groove. So hopefully we'll be able to cut a pretty straight one and won't have any faulty, because you can get like a wobbly thing and it can be wider and narrower along the line. But hopefully that'll be alright. And it's relatively, for a saw like this, it's one of the, it's got more tooth than the average would use to cut lumber. This is the blade that normally sits on this saw. You can see that's very rough indeed, and it makes a thicker groove as well. Problem with the circular saw like this, it's not designed like a router. The router is designed to starch like that, and then you can push it down into the piece you're working on and move around and then go back up. This isn't designed to do that. The cutting blade has no problem with it. That will go down perfectly. But this guide is just meant to come off the edge and cut into the material. So what I'm going to do, it is height adjustable, but it's not thorough enough. If you loosen that, it gets kind of wobbly. So you want to set that to the height that I want to work with. And then what I'm going to do is I've built up extra high rail sides here. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to adjust it to the height that I want to cut. And I'm going to do this. And set it like that. And then go down into the bit neck like that. And then push forward and make cuts. We're going to have to make 4 cuts. I'm going to start from this side and cut that way. And then I'm going to move these over and cut the groove on the other side. And then we're going to have to take these away, move them again, and make it cut the other way because of this guide sticking out so far at the back. I can't make my way to the top of the fretboard before I hit the angle of the headstock. So I can only go to about there, and I need to go 50 millimeters further back like that. So I'm going to have to turn the saw around to make that. I'm going to make the entire depth in one cut. I thought about doing it in several passes. But there's a risk every time I put this down, there's a risk of making it kind of like go like down like that. If I do that several times on top of each other, I might have a perfect cut, and the next time I'm going to come in and go like that, so I make a wider cut than I need, more than what I need. So I figure it's best to go down one time. This being such a risky thing as it is, going down one time and then cut the entire depth. I mean, this has no problem cutting. You're going to cut around 15 millimeters into the neck. and that's no problem for saw like this. This cuts 2x4s in one go. So that is the task at hand. We're going to try, see how this goes. Might have a completely ruined neck, or it might work. I give it about 60-40. 60% chance of it being a success, 40% chance that I'll ruin this base, which wasn't very good to begin with. Oh yeah, also another thing, the width. Might be hard to see. I'll place these 2x4s into the neck on each side, following the outside of the neck. So they sit a little bit like that. That's because it's easier to measure the width of the neck instead of having to go down into the air with a tape measure or something like that. I can now measure between the edges to calculate how far, because I want to stay clear of the groove for the truss rod, but then at the same time I want to get as far in as I can, because the neck is thicker, so that's gonna make room for a thicker piece of carbon fiber, or a taller piece of carbon fiber, more accurately. So so that's kind of like that. I draw a line here. That's the width of the neck at the widest bit down here. So that's kind of the parallel to the center line. And that's what I use to calculate. And the carbon fiber pieces are going to go straight down. It's not going to go out like that. It's going to follow the middle of the neck. Yeah. And then we're going to cut it roughly to where it meets the body. Here. And roughly through to where it meets the nut in this end.
Myself for just one fuck with you. Drowning in the sea of hopeless believers with an unconnected stare. Don't really pay that much attention. I don't really think I care. Vision so clearly, badly stained. I got nothing left to give a pain. Shadows all emerge inside me, and I'm dying to stay safe. I got a empty tap for rock and roll, tattooed on my worn-out soul, and I kill myself for the undisputed. I kill myself for everlasting youth. I kill myself to see where I'm headed to. I kill myself for just one fuck with you.
Okay, we got the grooves cut, and they are not perfect, but they will hopefully work. The thing was that my saw, which is my grandfather's old saw, it's probably 40 years old, it decided to fail. Well, it was one of the brushes went down on it. After 40 years, it decided to do that today. So I was able to cut the groove on one side, and then I had to take the saw apart to replace the brush. Just one of the brushes. Luckily, I had one that I was kind of able to fit in there. But when I put it back together, something apparently became crooked with the guide. And I've looked at it and I can't figure out why it sits there crooked, but it sits crooked even though it looks to be sitting exactly the way in all the mounts that it should. So this, on this side, even though my jig was correct, I cut this with like a crooked guides in once it's strained a little bit toward the center. Yeah, well, that's just the way it is. I can't really cut another groove in there, and I'm just gonna fill this with carbon fiber and see where we're at. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So I'm gonna make carbon templates for the carbon fiber, because the carbon fiber is expensive. You don't want to cut that wrong. So I made 2 pieces of cardboard, a straight edge and then a curve, identical to the saw blade, because this groove obviously goes like that in each end. So I made 2 pieces, so we're gonna lay them in like this into the groove and then slide them until we hit the end there. And then we use this on the other side and we slide that one until it hits the end there. And then we tape them together. I figured that was the easiest way to calculate the length, because this is one height, this is another height. The line in between there won't be the exact same as the straight line at the bottom, and the curves and all that stuff will make it complicated.
I don't really think I care. Vision so clear, me badly stained. I got nothing left to give a pain. Shadows all emerge inside me, and I'm dying to stay safe. I got a empty tap for rock and roll, tattooed on my worn out soul, and I kill myself for the undisputable truth. I kill myself for everlasting youth. I kill myself to see where I'm headed to, and I kill myself for just one fuck with you.
Okay, so we got the carbon fiber strips in there. They're obviously a little bit too tall. We gotta grind them down and sand them out, holding them down with these metal strips. This one sat perfectly down by itself. This one had to be pressed down a little bit. I used some quick epoxy glue on this one, but it seemed a little bit thick, so I was a little bit worried that I wasn't gonna be able to squeeze it up. On the sides on this one I used epoxy, the same kind of epoxy resin as I laminated into the carbon fiber. That is very strong. This dries up in about half an hour. This dries up in 8 hours. So that has more time to sink into all the cracks and all that stuff. And yeah, but we'll see tomorrow if this has any effect at all. I mean, there's no doubt that carbon fiber is stronger than maple by far. The question is, will it be strong enough? Because I mean, it isn't that much. I mean, you see how much is sticking up here out of those strips that are made. So the thickness down, obviously it's more on this, on the inside, because of the curve of the neck, but still, maybe we have like 12 millimeter thickness at neck at this end, and obviously a lot more down here. But this is the way, this is where it sort of bends. So we'll see if this has enough effect and whether it will stick, because that's another issue. Because of these grooves not being 100% perfect, some places there's some small gaps. In some other places, especially up here, I had to hammer them in because it was really tight. So if there's a gap, glue is always best when it's squeezed between the things you're going to glue. When there's a gap that you have to fill in with glue, there's always a risk of that cracking when you start to move this thing. So that's the big question. Will it hold together? Probably wasn't the easiest way to stiffen this neck. Might have been easier to take the fretboard off and glue them in from the top like they do, if they do it when they build it. Or I've also been thinking, that's not really possible to do with a neck that I already built, but it would be interesting to build a neck out of 3 slices of wood and then laminate the carbon fiber in between. So you start with a carbon fiber cloth and lamination, and then you squeeze that in between the wood. That would have been interesting to do, but that means building a neck from scratch. Maybe I'll do that on another base, or maybe if this doesn't work, I'll have to do it on this one. We'll see.
Turn it up and no way down, louder than the thunder. In your back, commercial stack, gonna take you under. Once you're in, there's no way out. Over that sensation, broken glass and running grass. Total devastation. Doesn't really matter if you're truly God's believer. Nothing's gonna kill you from the backline fever, yeah. Tinnitus of bleeding ears, no help from the healthcare. No remorse or living force, breezy music out there. Broken tinnitus like a dream, beyond that creation. Makes it broken, ain't no job, rock and roll nation. Don't you come and brag about your fight to a receiver. Nothing's gonna blow away my backline fever, yeah. Oh yeah. Turn it up and no way down, louder than the thunder. In the back of muscle stack, gonna take you under. Once you're in the snow.
Okay, as you can see, I have put the tuners, the strings, and the bridge back on. Just to get a little bit of a feel how it works. I haven't done anything with the finish. I've just roughly sanded them down with 80 grit paper to match the shape of the headstock. No, not the headstock, the shape of the neck. And I just put it back together briefly to just get a feel of how it's like. And it is improved a lot. It is stiffer, but it's still not as stiff as I would like it to be. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make 2 more slots, and I'm gonna pile together what I have left of carbon fiber, and hopefully that will make it to 5 millimeters instead of 2.5, which this ended up being. I was hoping for 3, but it ended up being 2.5. Carbon fiber is a bit tricky to calculate the depth or the thickness of the material. So this time I'm going to aim for 5 millimeters, because then I can use a router. I have a 5 millimeter bit for the router, and then I can use a router which makes a better slot, a smoother, more controllable in depth, more controllable in width, and just generally better. And having a wider slot will probably make it easier to get them properly down there, because I can't really be sure if this sits on the bottom all the way. There might be a pocket with, just epoxy glue down in there. Because that's kind of how I was aiming for 3 millimeters, ended up being 2.5. I was aiming for 15 millimeters down. I think we're at 12 at the high end, because this is obviously curved, so it's probably 12 millimeters here, maybe it's a little less, 10 on that side. So doing it with a router probably will be better, and we'll put a little bit thicker material in. The thing is, it's not heavy. I mean, these are thin strips, so probably you're thinking, of course, it wouldn't be heavier. But carbon fiber is twice as heavy as maple wood. So you can't really make the entire neck out of carbon fiber because that would be really heavy. But these little strips probably won't affect too much. So going up to 5mm won't be a problem. Also, I'm not gonna bother with the heel this time because this is stiff enough. I think down here the problem is mostly up at this end. So I'm just gonna make them from here and down to here, because then I don't have to make them that deep. You know, just make a shallow groove along this side. So I'll try that in the morning and we'll see how that goes. Okay, here we got the second pair of grooves cut with a router and not a saw, and you can see it's much wider grooves. Also, I cut them right into the next to the old ones. You can see here the rounding from the end of the circular saw blade I've used last time. This time it goes straight down to its depth, and on this side we're touching the fingerboard, so I can't really get any deeper than that. And then nice and tight. Obviously these are twice as wide, so we'll get 3 times as much carbon fiber in overall with this round, and hopefully that'll work, because if it doesn't, well, there's really not much more I can do with this neck. I mean, you can only fit that much in there. Okay, so we'll glue in the carbon fiber and see where we're at.
Gotta quit up, tease my baby.
Okay, so we got second pair of carbon fiber strips sanded down into the neck. You can see them right here. That's the thin one I laid in first, and then we got the wider, the thicker one at there, and it's a little bit harder to see into with the black paint we got right here, but there's two on this side as well. And they don't run as far in, they stop here. The thick ones stop here, and the thin ones go all the way down to the body and actually into the body slightly. They're just roughly sanded in now. I'm gonna sand with, smooth them out even further, and obviously paint it. Before I painted the neck and painted the back of the guitar, I put the strings on, the bridge strings and the tuners, just to test it. I'm gonna show you when it's finished, because there's no pickups in here now, so I can't really get that much sound out of it. I just played it to get a feel out of it, because I've also been sanding down the frets. And it really is working. I tried to bend the neck while I'm playing it. I can't mute the strings. Obviously, you can, get it out of tune, but it's much more stable. There's no fret buzz. The neck is straight. It does bend when you put the strings out, so you have to use the truss rod to get the neck back, but you can get the neck perfectly straight without fret buzz and without it being unstable. It's been sitting with the strings on for about a week and a half, and it stays in tune, and the string height is the same. The neck doesn't seem to bend anymore, so it's definitely improved. So I'm gonna take this back to the workshop and sand it down. I didn't take the masking tape. Obviously I'm gonna have to mask up more when I paint it. So I'm gonna take it to the workshop and keep on sanding at the back here, put some primer and some paint on, and get it nice and smooth, flat black finish. Okay, we're ready to paint. Sanded down the primer. This I'm gonna paint the whole guitar. No, didn't really need to paint the front, but I flattened out because the structure of the wood is kind of sinking. The paint over time, paint sinks in to the structure of the wood, so the grains in the wood shows over time. So I've sanded that down, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of black in the edges here and stuff like that, and then I'm gonna put flat clear coat over the top. And the reason why I use white primer, because you can use black primer obviously, but I'm using the primer as a base coat for this white. So around the edges here where it's going to be kept white, there's white primer underneath this tape. So I'm going to put black color, water-based color, and then I'm going to take off this blue tape and then put clear coat, flat clear coat over both the white and the black.
Through my heart and my spine,
Right, here we are. The base is finished, assembled back together. You can't see a trace of anything being done back here, but we got 4 pieces of carbon fiber running all the way up this neck, and it's all painted over. And well, this is the test. Like the Thunderbird, you change the note, obviously. It's not made out of solid steel, but still, it's miles ahead of what it used to be. I mean, it doesn't just go directly mute when I pull it. I have to pull it really hard, and it just goes slightly out of tune. So this is much stiffer neck, and just in general, it feels more firm, tighter. There's no fret buzz. It just feels like well, I'd say high end, but at least it feels like a much better quality instrument than what it used to be. This is now, it feels like on a level with those higher end Epiphones. In those kind of basses, it doesn't feel like one of the cheapest ones that you buy when you're starting out playing. Now it's worth what it is, basically. So yeah, I'm gonna make a separate video when I play some songs all the way through on this, like kind of like demo. Now that I am finally satisfied with how it is, hopefully, I mean, I put it together last night, just to the neck with the truss rod and the action and the height of the strings and all that stuff. It has to sit for a while and just to make sure that it stays how it is. But carbon fiber is a pretty dead material, so it shouldn't change that much. And hopefully it'll stay in this nice, tight, firm shape that it is now. And then in a few weeks' time, I'm gonna make a demo, and I'm probably gonna play some Motorhead on this thing because I'm a Motorhead guy, and this is a Rickenbacker, or Rickenbacker look like, and it's a Rickenbacker with Thunderbird pickups, which is what Lemmy used to have back in the day. He used to put vintage Thunderbird pickups in his first Rickenbackers. So I'm gonna play some Motorhead stuff on this as a demo and put out there in a few weeks' time. But now I'm gonna just I'm gonna take it to rehearsal next week, see how it works there, and just keep an eye on it and see that it stays the way it is. But right now I'm really satisfied with it. So it was worth the try to put in those carbon fiber stiffeners, and I'm probably gonna do that in more basses in the future.